So this is Super Saiyan Squeamish, and I don't really feel like doing another formal intro. So what we have here is gonna be some God Eater gameplay that I was too lazy to go through and add audio correctly, so I'm gonna watch this like a TV show and give commentary on my own gameplay. I do intend to open the box of God Eater a little bit more, and of course, well, when I decide how I want to approach the content in general, I'll just go from there. But given I already recorded some of these just on a whim, I felt like why not do something with them rather than let them go to waste. Plus, the gameplay itself, which I'll let you in on a little secret, I've just been enjoying the game rather than thinking about content purposes, but I realized that overall it's actually quite fun, and not just to play. It's actually really neat to watch as well, and there's tons of things that are, I guess, just like any of our other dives and stuff like that, fairly interesting. And plenty of, for the weirdos, there's plenty of that as well. But that being said, God Eater itself has a really nice premise on monsters, cool weaponry, interesting design, and I think outside of the very nice anime cutscenes, story, and anime feel overall, I would have to say that God Eater, what it brings to the table is most definitely the mechanics. Although some of them are fairly mid, or I guess you could say traditional to the genre or archetype. That's a spider. Archetype of games, which would be like not catch and release, but like hunting style games. I don't know what to classify these are. I'm not going to compare it to its tried and true, because I really do feel like it stands out as its own neat game. But anyways, we'll get into the gameplay here. If I can get my video to work. I have to get the volume right this time, or I'm going to be mildly not actually frustrated. Although, I think this might be a gold mine, because like I said, I finally decided to go back and look at what I had recorded, because sometimes I just press record. There's fancy buttons for that, and it's actually really fun to watch. Although it's a little hectic, and this is a emulator, although I'm sure most of you have caught on to that by now. I'm trying to get my phone here positioned. It is fairly, I would say fairly mid-tier. Hopefully that doesn't become a catchphrase. Although it might, due to the amount of weapons that we'll eventually cover. One minute here. Let's see if I can get this. I feel like the dinosaur. I do apologize if those noises were slightly bothersome or abrasive. I'm not going to cut them out due to the fact that I realized not all of my fans are into the shorts that we have been working on here. Anyways, now that I gave a brief description of God Eater and I have no idea what I'm going to fill this visual space with, let's watch and discuss my content or gameplay. This will be fairly short, as this was a single quest. I don't even know if it's from start to finish, although it's a pretty, I already said this, but it's a pretty good introduction to what you can expect from God Eater. Although I do have to say that I tend to change my gameplay styles in these kind of games, which lends to my success rate, or I guess polish is how I would refer to it, in terms of, like, I guess skill at the games tends to vary. But I'm doing a good job of staying on track. And like I said, I took time to turn this game or experience into kind of my pastime, as I usually spend most of my time working, sleeping, usually eating. I haven't had much of an appetite though. And, well, creating stuff. Kinda like a shark. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. I don't think it matters that much. We're just gonna carry on. Anyways, we're gonna get to it. Hopefully I find something interesting to fill this visual space with, and not just a 3-second clip on repeat over and over again. Although, that is quite handy. Okay. First thing I'm gonna note before I press play and decide to start talking about this is, one, gameplay is fairly fast. So it's going to be a couple of these videos before I get the hang of exactly how I want to, like, respond to commentary and, well, respond to my own recordings. And I will say that when I do get to the point where I am doing live audio, it's going to be a tricky one. You'll see why. A lot goes on and is very quick and fast-paced, and not all stages or enemies, or if we're going to get really God-eater here, they're called origami. Well, this is another thing, is I'm pretty sure I'm going to want to open this as its own category of content, so buckle up. That's something to expect at some point, whether it be shorts, story form, I don't know yet. But there's a lot here that I personally have always been interested in, but never gave it the full time to dive in, so it will be a fun experience for us all to go through. And overall, like I said, it'll branch out and find its way. Due to the fact that, as you're about to see, like I said, there's a lot that goes on, and all of the Super Saiyan Squeamish fans are immediately going to recognize and know exactly how I would be thinking about this, and see that I could go one of a million different routes with it, and I would want to give a little bit of something for everybody, but that takes time. And also, playing this game is kind of like an endless loop, but to get to all of the stuff to show you, there's a lot to go. Anyways, I'm already turning a 6-minute and 47-second video into, well, you guys deserved some audio, of course. Cough, cough, wink, wink. I did not mean that in a weird way, but some of you are very strange, and that's okay. Anyways, while we wait for more Sonic videos, here is some audio. Also, like I said, this is really fun to watch, so I'm gonna press play. As long as it's not so loud it blows my ears off. And I'm going to press pause because that was very loud. Hold on. I'm gonna really try and not turn this into a coffee stand experience, although I know some of you out there are really looking forward to that. That will find its time and place. With that being said, I think I got this just right. Okay, so before I press play, you're gonna be most likely looking at the viewing screen here. I'm doing this in a way that I don't have to fight with the audio too much, although it's gonna require me to do a little bit of nitpicking just to get the timing right. But with that being said, God Eater takes place essentially like post-apocalyptic to a degree. So this is like one of the areas you'll see, and I'm not going to do a whole thing on this right now, but just to give you some like, I don't know, like mental imagery, although your eyes are most likely getting visual imagery. It's like a broken down city in the middle of a desert. Giant monsters. And really cool weapons that can change shape. Most notably, gun swords. Anyways. Pressing play now, I think I'm nervous about discussing my own game. Like, it's just a weird introspective. I normally am playing video games just to play them. I'm not necessarily, like, watching myself play, if that makes sense. Anyways, I'm gonna press play, and I'm just gonna talk about this. And try to pretend that this isn't slightly strange. Whisper, whisper, it's just not how I normally do things. But I honestly had no intention of recording this, besides recording it. So, anyways, the way these usually work, or the way they work, is you have like a quest roster with a given monster to slay or origami, whether it be 1, 2, or just a bunch of smaller origami, given there's supposedly 4 different classes, maybe 5. That is essentially the gameplay loop. Drop in, slay the origami, back to headquarters, repeat. I believe this was still in my probably first couple hours of playing, maybe like give or take 2 or 3, and this was not the first initial quest, but the first initial origami that I faced outside of the little ones you'll see here. So the first thing I want to talk about is 1. As you can see, the weapons are super cool. Although fairly simple. Like, it's outside of like normal hack and slash gameplay, it is a little complicated due to the fact that, like I said, as you just saw, it switches from gun to sword with the abilities varying and the reasons differing. But the biggest thing here is there's 6 different types of guns, and I think also 6 different types of what would we consider it, melee weapons or bladed weapons? Whatever that would be. And so that's essentially, I would still refer to it as like more or less 4 different playstyles, although 6 given each weapon does have its own movesets, ways to maneuver, and goals to achieve necessarily. Now, your main focus isn't necessarily going to be, try not to repeat myself here, using the ranged weapons as your primary damage, just kind of the same, but at the same time, you really can capitalize on the different strengths of them. Things like the machine gun for nailing down certain parts or focusing on element or status damage. Although this is mostly Japanese, I don't know my kanji very well, and so it's kind of been a guessing game. But that's been honestly my favorite part of it so far, given I do enjoy the languages. Now, with that being said, as I was talking about the different weapon types, specifically machine guns, rifles, shotguns, and stuff like that, they all blend into how you feel like playing. As you can see here, that in moments where this origami isn't too necessarily difficult, but in moments where I need some space to heal, or, well, it creates the space for you rather than chasing it down, saving the time using the machine gun, it's perfect. Rapid fire, less focused on aiming, so things like that don't happen. And, well, the biggest goal being to whittle down the focus points, like breakable parts of the face, in this case the tail, arms, and I believe, based off of the hitboxes and my best guess from, well, knowing game design by playing games, especially like this, the top of that, the electrode node looking thing, it does spin, super cool. It's most definitely a high damage point. Given this is kind of the first video and I'm just talking about my gameplay here, I've never really been one to play with people, so experiences like this are normally silent for me. I'm not necessarily like the type to shout and get excited and go woohoo or anything like that, so I may or may not just use these as an opportunity to talk about God. Although eventually I'll figure out how to talk about them, and there will be more as we develop kind of, I guess, what the God Eater experience will look like for my channel, or this channel, or whatever the name is. But what I was getting at, sorry, I'm laying down, but I just needed to get this out of the way, and I figured this would be perfect. Also, it's kind of relaxing. So, with that being pointed out, what I was going to say is things like this where obviously the enemy is quite large, hitboxes really do make the difference. I haven't researched them like I have other games of this genre, but things like the tip of the nose or the tip of the tail, which if you don't know what a hitbox is, I'll go ahead and I'll explain that. Essentially, think of like a little radius with, I guess, different buttons in it, and wherever you hit the button has a different chance at a different damage ratio. So hitting just the face would be like 5 to 10, but let's say the nose is more of a 7 to 8. But the difference being the hitbox is smaller, more precise. So you would want to use, well, I guess the next thing I would say is your weapon also has a hitbox, which some of these I'm hoping are janky. What I mean by that is where the tip of your sword makes contact with the enemy's hitbox would also be a hitbox. But in some cases, we're about to talk about what you just saw in a minute here. It'll probably have to repeat, but in some cases, like I said, I didn't finish there. Awkward. In some cases, things like the handles of the weapons or certain frames, movements of where they swing and whatnot, have hitboxes themselves, and you can take really good advantage of this, whereas while being in a perfect position and getting like essentially an invisible hit due to the fact that your first swing could land on a hitbox, and then the ending of your frame, your movement action, would also essentially do damage. A lot of these things are usually refined and polished by game developers, but sometimes they make their way in and create fun little mechanics for people that are really trying to capitalize on the game's strength. Well, they're to discover and do exactly that. Now, before I wrap this up, because I'm tired, I will say the last thing I want to talk about is I think I do know how I intend to discuss these videos, and I hope you enjoyed and all of that stuff. But what you saw there that I did not mention, although it is like the main focus of the God Eater franchise and weapons, is the weapons themselves are made out of origami, and they have I don't know, I'm not going to give the exact details now because I don't want to get it wrong, because I'm still a fairly new God Eater fan myself. But there is essentially a living organism in the weapon and it is a giant mouth. So you can use the abilities, well, there's two ways. It's right after an attack, like the quick snap you saw, or hold charge and get a full chomp out of it. And what that essentially does is fills up a charge gauge or fury gauge. If you're a gamer, you're familiar with this concept. If you're not, it's essentially like a power-up bonus. And the more you do it, the higher the power-up gets, and it runs out. So it's something you put into your combat loop, between attacking and switching to machine gun mode and all kinds of cool stuff like that. It creates a fun little mechanic where it's also awesome to think about that your weapon just eats stuff at the same time. It creates good diversity in your gameplay and challenges in finding the openings where you can do that to keep your power up bar full, because it really does make the difference, especially depending on the weapon. Given that is the last topic, I will say that is only one of the weapon types. So if you do intend to watch these gameplay videos with or without audio, maybe we'll just leave it at that, do expect some variation, as I tend to, I prefer to match to things, and that's pretty much it. So I will be mastering the weapons that I choose to give you the most refined, knowledgeable gameplay I can, and it will take some time for me to get the formula right, as well as the language and stuff I want to use. But with that being pointed out, I really do hope you enjoy, and I think it is going to be a fun experience for us, and overall, I am going to call it a night. And if you're watching this as it came out, I hope you have a good night as well. And if you're watching this just because you're a God Eater fan or a Super Saiyan Squeamish fan, thank you. I do enjoy this video. All the voices are always fun, and the different diversity of gameplay creates it interesting. If you've been watching my other content, I do apologize if you're something, given I love to make stuff for something like that. If your stuff hasn't been there, I apologize. I do intend to go back and work on things, as clearly I do this for passion, if that's the word, and I don't necessarily chase things with greed in mind. So if it matters to you, I'll try to find the time to make it happen. Although, finding the balance of I need to enjoy this a little bit, just enough to keep going, and I need to make sure that its use is in the right intent, of course. But I did notice the views, and I saw things like that, and I do apologize if I don't respond to your comments necessarily. I tend to not know what to say in these things, and so, yeah. Now, I will say I will probably make God Eater shorts, but I don't like to be a sheep very much. If you understand that, you understand it. And if not, you don't. And I do apologize if any of this audio is strange, but it's cool. And anyways, like I said, I hope you have a good night, or day, or whatever time you're watching this, and you can expect to see more God Eater. It's going to be pretty good. I personally will have to say that I've been quite far in the game itself. Not really. And I'm looking forward to diving into the experience and sharing it with you more. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. Good night.